Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our inspirational interview series. I'm Hannah Levin from Heartfelt Wellbeing, and I am so delighted to have our special guest here today, Amy B. Scher. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's so fun to be here. Hi, everybody.
Yay. Well, I am so excited. And as I was telling you before we went live, I have about 20 million questions for you.
We'll try to cover as many of the 20 million as we can.
As we can. Yes, before we get started with talking, I do just want to give you a little intro. I'm just going to read the bio that I posted for you, just so if folks are not sure who I'm interviewing today, give you a little context. So Amy B. Scher is an expert in mind-body healing and helping people release blocks to become their happiest, healthiest, and most creative selves. Sounds familiar to us around here. She's the award-winning and best-selling author of 4 books, which are translated into 20 languages and endorsed by notable authors such as Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love, and Sanjiv Chopra, MD, Harvard Medical School, and Brotherhood with Deepak Chopra, and more. Her work has been featured in Oprah Daily, CNN, CBS, Washington Post, Cosmopolitan, Good Morning America, and more. She lives in New York City with her beautiful wife and bad cat.
Now you know everything about me.
Yes. So we're thrilled to have you here. And I've been reading her book. I'm not sure if this will show up, but this is How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can. And this book was really, really powerful. My parents actually heard you interviewed on New Dimensions, and my dad said, I think you would really like it. So he's who turned me on to you.
I love that. That
I'm
was
so
so
grateful.
many years ago that I did that. After that book came out, I think in 2016.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's plant seeds and connect with people throughout time. So can we start just by hearing, I know you're used to telling this story, but just the basic story of how you came to be who you are and what you are doing what you are now.
Sure. So I got into mind, body, spirit healing because, like many of us who got into mind, body, spirit healing, we had to, because nothing else worked for the challenges I had for a chronic illness. I had chronic Lyme disease. So at some point in my 20s, I was bitten by a tick and did not know that I was bitten by a tick, and ended up with a chronic, debilitating illness that caused brain lesions and neuropathy. And I mean, I was wheelchair bound for part of it and bed bound for part of 10 years, basically. Just jumping from doctor to doctor. I finally did get a correct diagnosis after 7 years, but then it was still years of nothing that doctors could do for that diagnosis working. And so I was really, really in bad shape. And I took a huge leap of faith, maybe silly, maybe stupid, still not sure. And I went to India for an experimental stem cell transplant. And that's not approved in the US, that, was on the outskirts of Delhi, India, such a foreign culture for me, a foreign place, although I was very well traveled. It was just a different world. And really, really helped me to regenerate my body. I had a really good, positive experience. And then I came home and I was like, okay, great. I'm cured, basically. I'll just go back to now I'll just continue on with life. And that was like the funniest universal joke in the world, because I didn't realize at that point that you can't just go back to old patterns and an old life without fundamentally changing who you are, mind, body, and spirit, in order to stay well. And so about a year after my stem cell treatment, which was quite miraculous, it got me out of a wheelchair, walking, off all my pain medications, I started to have physical problems again. And it was then that I had gone to the ends of the world, basically the ends of the earth from where I lived, to I had an epiphany that was like, wait a second, if I healed the physical problem and it just recurred, I just manifested like all these other problems. There has to be something I'm missing. And it was really when I made that kind of mind, body, spirit connection and started reading about and discovering how our emotions and our emotional patterns like perfectionism and people pleasing and fear and all of the things we all, that are human, how that really, really impacts the physical body. And that was a turning point in my illness, and my wellness. And once I explored that and addressed that, through mind body techniques, including several that I created myself that are now in the book that you held up, I got well and I stayed well. And it's been like 15 years now. So, yeah, so that's my story in a nutshell.
Yes. And it's so powerful. So much of what, as I've been reading your book, I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. And it's, I love that saying, truth is one, paths are many, like that
Yes.
there are so many different ways. And so much of what you speak about is fully aligned with what we do here in this community. And it's
Yes.
so powerful. And it's from a different perspective. And that's so exciting to me. One of the things I want to read a little quote from this book, and it's really about the thoughts that we have. And one of the things that I work a lot with my clients with, and with myself too, because it is an ongoing process, is seeing where what we call stuck stories show up, of like, and those are the beliefs that are creating imbalance.
Yes.
And so you said, maybe I even believed at some level that being sick afforded me a level of safety I couldn't conceive of otherwise. It sheltered me from a world in which I found it too hard simply to be comfortable with being myself. With all of this, I separated from my own inner being and strayed off course, apparently so far that my body was talking to me in the only way it knew how, through symptoms. And this was so powerful for me to read, because I always talk about like listening with the ear of your heart. Like if your body's expressing something, pain,
Yes.
displeasure, discomfort, whatever, it's a chance for us to be in communication, but often we get into a place of shut up and go away.
Right. Which only makes those symptoms louder. I mean,
Right.
I've tried that. I will attest to that. When we don't listen, our bodies are really, really honest, maybe
Yeah.
to a fault because they interrupt our busy lives. But the truth is that nobody stops to think about how their life is going until they have to. That's just the truth. Like, that's just the truth. Nobody pauses. And I think that can be learned to do that. But most of the time, chronic illness, anxiety, depression, those are the types of things that cause us to pause. And for
Right.
me, that was a giant pause in my life where it was like, okay, if I'm giving my body the physical, I went down the path of like every doctor, basically you could imagine. I went to the Mayo Clinic and, Minnesota, like all the best places. And I was doing the things that were supposed to remedy the physical issue, and it just didn't. So it was like, okay, well, I'm a Virgo, I'm very practical. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do and it's not remedying the physical, it's not only the physical. Like that's just process
Right.
of elimination. It's not like a huge insight, but I'm not super wise. It's just process of elimination. And so that was what really allowed me to go like, okay, well, these symptoms mean something else then. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't mean that the physical ailment wasn't really there. It didn't mean that I was making it up, but my
Right.
body had somehow manifested that physical illness that was real. Those things show up on scans, they show up on blood work, but it doesn't mean that the root isn't in part emotional and
Yeah.
spiritual.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And you talk about too, I was listening to an interview that you did with Tammy Simon.
Oh yeah.
Um, and you were talking there too about us actually owning our role, which I think is really hard, especially if folks have been struggling with sickness for a long time. We become self-identified with
Hmm.
that, and in the victim mindset, which we might even be like, I'm not in victim mindset.
Yeah.
And yet there is that role that we play, that in our own illness and
Yeah.
stress. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It was interesting for me because the longer I was sick, the more willing I was to be like, okay, maybe it's my fault. Like I became more, and when I say fault, it doesn't mean I intended for it to happen or I purposely contributed. It just means like I was playing some part.
Right.
But I do see that the longer somebody is ill, the more they become the more they identify with the victimness of being ill. But for me, it was really the opposite. The more I got frustrated with being sick, the more I was like, okay, it's my fault. Great. What do I do about it? Like, you know what I mean? Like I was like, I will take 100% responsibility if that's what fixes this. And ironically or not, that is what fixed it,
Right.
was just being like, okay, let's just pretend in a crazy world that I did contribute greatly to this problem that I feel totally out of control of and don't understand how I created. Let's just pretend for the sake of that's going to help me, right? Like, because people dig their heels in and it's like, okay, but what are you digging your heels in for? Because it's counterintuitive to the healing process. So I really was like, got to a point where I was like, okay, if this was me, great, fine. That's actually good because if it was me who did it, then it's me who can undo it because nothing else is undoing it. And so I was just willing to take it kind of lightly at some point and just go, great, it was me. Now let me try to fix it. And I do think like it's nobody's fault, but it's always your responsibility to
Mm.
take that piece and look at it. And when I started looking at it, I was like, oh no, I think I did have something to do with this. Like when I looked closer at some of my patterns and some of the ways that I sacrifice myself for other people, some of the toxic relationships I was in that, don't that the body does not like. Things like that, just like they do really, really make a difference. And I think it was easier for me to come to that because I had tried everything else. Like what was my excuse anymore? What was I going to blame it on anymore? Because nothing was fitting, nothing was working. And then two, like, what did I have to gain anymore by
Mhm.
being defensive
Yeah.
about that concept? And
Yeah.
the answer was absolutely nothing. I had everything to lose because I was just going to stay sick.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like we're willing to make change when we get to those places. And I
Exactly.
actually love that word fault because that is one of the translations of dosha. So in
Mm,
Ayurveda, dosha is the energy that, makes up our constitutions. And that idea of fault is where it's actually where things can go out of balance. And
mm.
so if we can recognize the fault, it's actually recognizing where things can go out of balance.
It's an
Then,
answer.
right, then we
Yes.
can be empowered to be like, oh, gotcha. Now we can have this different conversation over here.
Yes.
And and it's not about self-blame or shame or punishment or we're bad or awful. It's about that empowerment piece of like, if you can recognize how you got to where you are,
Yes.
unknowingly most often.
Yes.
We
Totally
had no
unknowingly.
idea, right?
But you
Then
can
we can
find a
go,
way out.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and I was thinking about this other quote from this book that touches on what you were saying, like we feel out of control. And you said feeling out of control is one of the biggest triggers for us feeling unsafe in this world.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of these principles that you're teaching and that I'm teaching, I always say any type of self-healing is doesn't matter what type is a is healing at the core because you are taking your health into your own hands.
Mhm.
And that counteracts that feeling of helplessness and feeling out of control. And so we talked earlier before we started recording about many paths and that there's
Yeah.
so many different ways to get to healing. But just even embracing or embodying the self-healing principles is its own healing modality. It really, really is because it makes your body feel safe at a core
Mhm.
level, which
Yeah.
is really important for healing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And along those lines, I wanted to ask you about kind of a combination of ancestral healing and kind of modern day lack of wisdom, maybe.
Yeah.
So if we look at, like, I know both you and I are from Jewish descent. We have ancestors that were treated horribly, And that has come down in our DNA, that everybody has certain things that of the past. And there's also this thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, as we are progressing now in modern culture of like, we're so technologically brilliant, we also have lost a lot. I mean, like, I'm practicing Ayurveda that has a lot of wisdom that's over 5,000 years old that has been lost. It's stuff that I feel like, why aren't we being taught this in kindergarten, how to live in rhythm with the seasons, how to, right? So when we look at energetic healing, being in alignment with ourselves, what is your perspective on how those pieces of like the ancient knowledge, I don't know if you agree that it's been lost or that perspective, but like we have this kind of DNA information that we've gotten from our family lineage. We also have what's been lost in terms of what we consciously know. And so how do we show up in this modern day where it's like, we can do anything we want, whenever we want to, everything's instant gratification, and heal?
I'm very much about like, I am not one of these people that like ever has, I have friends that are like in Mind Body Healing. They're like, we dream of like going off the grid where there's no cell phones and no, like, I want to live in one with nature. Like, I am not that person. I do not want to do that. I feel like I have done a very good job of blending my modern life with retaining the fundamental things that my body needs to be healthy. So I believe that there's a way to do it because I believe there's a lot of healing and joy in all of our modern culture too. Like, it's so fun to be able to do all of these things we couldn't do even 10 or 20 years ago. It's so fun to connect with people on social media. It's so fun. I mean, I live in New York City, which is like the craziest, biggest energy. And like, I find that very healing. Whereas like, I know people who are like, I feel terrible when I step foot in New York City. So I think of I think it's so personal what feeds us. Like, I think I would like fall to the ground and just feel a lack of energy if I spent 10 days off the grid. Like, I feel good in New York City where there's like stimulation and bright colors and like stuff to do. And I do need quiet time, and I do spend time in nature. I have Central Park really close, and we get away on vacations and we go to naturey places. That I think it's really important not to be scared of modern culture. There are a lot of people who aren't bothered by technology, like and like just all of that stuff. So I think that like the narrative around it is really dangerous, that we're like, if we start to worry that we're going to be sicker because of modern society, I think it's really important to focus on all the parts of modern society that feed us, that are amazing, that give us security, that give us entertainment, like however you want to look at it, and then still just come back to those things. And I think those ancient principles, or those foundational things that we need, we're always drawn toward. Like, there's a few things that I'm really drawn toward that I think even if I didn't consciously know, I would search them out, which I have before. Like, it's really important for me to like, I'm like one of those people that I really need like a lot of minerals. So like, that's something I discovered along the way, that it's like we burn through minerals and we need to keep replenishing those, and some people more than others, but it's just something I never knew, but I like found my way towards. So I have this feeling like those things can't get lost because they're always accessible in some way. And there are certain things that might be lost that I never need, that wouldn't be fulfilling for me anyways. I think we're all just on our own journey that way. But I think that if you find the things about modern culture that feed you and lift you up, then it's just easier to live in this world than to be always like worried about losing everything else. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a good blend.
Yeah. That's great to hear. Yeah. And will you talk a little bit about like being truly ourselves and how that is healing? And to me, that ties into this notion of dharma, of like,
Yes.
what are you here for? Right? It's no
Yes.
accident that any of us are here.
Yeah. So for me, being who you truly are is being able to relax into yourself and your environment. without, I mean, of course, and I always tell my clients, like, we all have to do things. People take like boundaries to such a far degree that they're like, well, I don't want to go to my mother's 75th birthday because, boundaries. And it's like, okay, sometimes you just have to go to your mother's 75th birthday or whatever. Like, we need to like be a little nuanced in it. But I think generally speaking, being who you really are is being able to do as much of your life as possible within alignment to who you really are. Also, you're an adult, so you'll have to do some things you don't like, but the core things about who you're in a relationship with, what kind of work you do, to whatever extent you have a choice. Now, there's a lot of people who don't have choices because of socioeconomic challenges and everything like that. But to live within alignment to who we are, what we want, how we feel, as much as humanly possible. And I don't think you have to get it anywhere near 100%, but as much as in alignment as you can be, I think the body and the soul are much, much happier.
Mm-hmm. And how do you see that affecting health? Like, I know that's part of your journey, but you also work with a lot of people that.
Yeah. So I just find that people who can't be themselves, who are hiding themselves, who are people pleasers, who are perfectionists, who put so much pressure on themselves, who are driven by fear, that really, really, really affects the body.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that makes you contract instead of feel expansive, whatever that is, if it's a relationship or it's the way you're eating or whatever, that is not helping you align with who you are. And the more aligned with who you are in how you express yourself and who you're around and what you're doing and your thoughts and your emotions, the better you feel. And people can feel that. Even if they're experiencing chronic illness, you can have one day or 1 hour or 1 minute where you're thinking about something or you're watching something and you just feel better because of what your thoughts are doing or how you're feeling or a decision you've made. And so I think it's just like our emotions are such a guidance system and we just have to really pay attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you said too is a berated body will not heal.
Yes. So you can't beat yourself up.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
doesn't work.
And how many of us do that constantly?
Yeah. Because I think that we're annoyed with our bodies and we're like, why isn't everybody else? Why is so-and-so's body not doing this? Why is so-and-so fine and we're not? Or why are my symptoms so bad? And it is super annoying. I always want to acknowledge that for people. It is super annoying when you have a lot of symptoms and it's frustrating and it's all of the things like we can't 100% of the time be like, this is a message from, you know what I mean? Like it is a message, that's true, but it's okay if you're annoyed sometimes. But what doesn't work is beating yourself up about it because that actually suppresses the immune system and just makes it harder to heal. So if you can just say, why is my body talking so loudly? I have such a fierce body. I have such a loud body. Like, what is it saying? Maybe I'm not getting the message. Maybe I need more time to heal after getting the message because things aren't instant. That's where I think modern culture gets in our way and modern society. Because, I always tell people healing is like, say you go out and get a sunburn, right? And then you come inside and you're like, oh my gosh, I made the mistake. I didn't, I wasn't careful. Now I have a sunburn. And you put the salve on or whatever you're going to put to heal your skin. It's going to take some time before that burn goes away. So from the time you realize you're injured or you've gone wrong somewhere and you put on the healing remedy, whether it be Ayurvedic medicine or energy work or whatever all the things are, supplements, whatever it is, there's going to be a gap in time, probably much longer than you want, between the time you put on the remedy and the time you see the healing. And you have to think of whatever that medicine is being like salve. That skin still has to heal. That skin has to grow back if it's, if it's at that level of needing repair. Like things just take time. So I think remembering that helps us beat up on ourselves less.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you, I don't know, conceive of the, like you were at one point wheelchair bound and your health was just declining. Some people at that point would just say, this is just the way it is for me. And I'm stuck here. There's nothing I can do.
Right.
And where does there has to be another way? There's another possibility, or I believe that something can shift.
Yeah, that's it's such an interesting conversation because some people do that. And I think that's its own kind of peace. Like, I think that's
Mhm.
really interesting. I
Yeah.
couldn't do that. I was like, I came to a place, and I teach this now, to be okay with where you are right now while you're trying to get somewhere better. Because
Right.
I don't think fighting where you are constantly is helpful either. So if your entire life is about getting out of this place you are in now, that becomes really difficult on your body. That does affect
Mm.
your immune system and your nervous system and everything. So I always say the perfect balance is to surrender where you are for right now, like today, while you're trying to get somewhere else, somewhere better. For me, I think I just either intuitively knew I could get myself out of it, or was just so stubborn I thought I could, and it worked out. So, but I also really admire people who are like, you know what, I don't want to keep doing this. I'll be fine if I live like this forever. But I just think I wasn't. So I was just like not. I wrote a memoir years ago, and one of the things I wrote in there was, if I don't move the goalposts for my own life, who will?
Mm.
And I really felt like that. Like, if I don't believe in better for myself, who will? Like, there's nobody that's going to come save me. It has to be me who demands that I deserve more, or that I can get to more, or whatever it is. And I think that for me was really important, and probably a little bit of a sense of control too.
Mhm.
Like, I just really felt better trying to get somewhere
Yeah.
better. Like, and I was in my 20s when I first got sick. So it was
Mhm.
tough too, being that young.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the tools that I really like that I've learned about from you is what you've created called the sweep.
Yes.
That does that. It acknowledges where you are right now,
Yes.
and that there's a possibility for
Yes.
what is possible. Do you want to say a little bit more about that technique?
Sure. So the sweep technique is a subconscious release technique. It's basically a script that you read. It's on my YouTube channel or in my book, that helps you sort of acknowledge where you are, but change your programming and your energy to help release some of the stuff that's keeping you stuck where you are. And the wording is really gentle and acknowledges that, we are where we are sometimes because we needed to be there. Like, you know what I mean? A lot of times I really believe that there's a subconscious belief with a lot of people that illness keeps us safe, that we may have needed at some time, but then it becomes outdated, right? So the sweep script that I wrote really just acknowledges that sort of delineation of, I maybe needed this at some point, but now it's time to let it go. And I think finding purpose in an illness is really helpful, or
Yes.
understanding how it got created or how it served you in some way, and just trying to update your mental records of maybe
Mhm.
not needing that anymore.
Mhm. Yeah. I like to think about it too as a teacher. Like,
Yeah.
what do I get to learn now from this?
Yes. Yes,
So that I can
totally.
move on to the next lesson. And
Yeah.
also like that what you shared about when you beat yourself up, ask yourself what's the next less shitty thing you can believe about yourself.
Yeah. Because there's so many techniques that teach you, like, to go from, like, hating yourself to, like, believing you're all love and light. And I always tell people, just go from, like, I'm the worst person in the world, to, like, okay, maybe I'm not the worst person in the world. I'm sure there are worse people than me. Just, like, try to, like, step your negative self-talk down a tiny bit by a tiny bit, because it's really hard to make that leap.
Yes. Yes. I loved that when I heard that. I was like,
Thank
yes, because
you.
when we start being like, I'm wonderful, or like, I don't really believe
Then
that.
you don't
Like,
believe it,
yeah.
right? You need like a bridge in
Right.
between.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Um, yeah, and I know you're working on a new book right now. Do you want to say more?
So I'm actually working on a fiction book for the first
Oh,
time. Yeah, a young adult novel. So, which has been really fun. And then I finished a travel book. So I write all kinds of things. I write mostly self-help, and I have a memoir called This Is How I Saved My Life, which is all about my own personal healing journey and my trip to India, and what I discovered and how I discovered it. But yeah, my current book is a fiction book, which is so fun and different. So
that is wonderful. Yes.
yeah,
And I often say that when we get ourselves into deeper alignment, then a lot of space opens up for
it's so true.
creativity. And
Mhm.
you're a great example of that. Like,
Thank
look how
you.
far you've come. Right? Like,
Thank
that's
you
so
so
amazing.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in closing, where can folks find more about you?
So they can find me on my website, which is amybscher, SCHER.com. And then I also have a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of like mini healing sessions. So if anybody wanted to go there and just follow along and get a sense of my work, that's a really good place to find me too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time
you.
today. It was such a pleasure talking with you. And I know that this has been helpful to a lot of folks who got to watch today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun.
You're so welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.